This happened earlier this year, and I still don't know how to explain it without sounding insane. I'm 22, born and raised in Colorado. Out here, there's plenty of abandoned places if you know where to look. Old ranger stations, service tunnels, even Cold War bunkers that people swear were sealed decades ago. My friends and I have always been into that kind of stuff. We weren't vandals or anything, just thrill seekers. Flashlights, cameras, backpacks with snacks and water, that was our thing. My buddy Aaron was usually the one who found locations, but this time it was Matt. He's the kind of guy who spends hours on weird corners of Reddit and forums I've never heard of. One night he showed up to our usual hangout spot, slammed his laptop on the table, and pulled up a grainy satellite image. It looked like nothing, just a patch of trees in the middle of nowhere. But he pointed out a square outline. According to him, it was an entrance to some kind of underground facility built in the 60s. A bunker. I thought he was full of it, but Aaron leaned in right away. Dude, that's reinforced concrete. That's not natural. Matt claimed he'd seen comments online from people saying they'd tried to find it and couldn't. That was enough to hook us. The next weekend, the three of us loaded up my Tacoma with gear and headed out. We drove for hours into the mountains, past small towns that looked half-abandoned themselves. Once we left paved roads, cell service dropped to nothing. We followed Matt's offline pin to a stretch of dirt trail that didn't even look drivable. We parked, grabbed our packs, and hiked the last mile. It was late afternoon, the air sharp and cold, and the smell of pine was strong. My boots crunched over old pine needles while we scanned the area. For a while, it felt like we were wasting our time, just forest and rocks. Then, Aaron spotted something. A patch of ground that looked too flat, too deliberate. We brushed away dead leaves and dirt until we saw it. Metal. A heavy, rusted hatch, about 4 feet across, flush with the ground. Matt was grinning like a kid on Christmas. Told you! The hatch had a circular handle, corroded but intact. It took all three of us pulling together to get it to budge. When it finally creaked open, the smell hit us. Stale, metallic, like air that hadn't moved in decades. A narrow ladder disappeared into darkness. None of us wanted to admit we were scared, but you could feel it. Aaron broke the silence first. If this ladder gives out, we're screwed. Still, we went down, one by one. My hand slipped a little on the cold metal rungs, and by the time my boots hit concrete, my stomach was tight. I flicked on my flashlight. We were standing in a concrete corridor that stretched both directions. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally. The air was damp and heavy, and every sound echoed too much. Old stenciled letters on the wall read USAF property in faded black. "This is insane," Aaron whispered, though his voice still bounced off the walls. We started walking. Every so often, we'd pass rusted doors, most sealed shut. One hung half open, and when we pushed inside, it looked like some kind of barracks. Rows of decaying bunk beds, mattresses eaten away by mold. There were even old footlockers, though most were empty. The deeper we went, the colder it got. My breath came out in faint mist. I tried to tell myself it was just because we were underground, but the chill felt wrong. Then we heard it. At first, it was just a faint clank, like metal on concrete somewhere down the hall. We froze, exchanged looks. Matt mouthed, "Did you hear that?" It came again. Clank, drag, clank. Aaron killed his flashlight, and after a second we did too. Total darkness swallowed us. We stood there, barely breathing, listening. The sound was steady, deliberate, like someone dragging something heavy. It was impossible to tell how far away it was. The echoes made it feel like everywhere at once. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure it would give us away. I reached for my flashlight, but Aaron grabbed my arm hard, shaking his head. Then, without warning, the dragging stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds that felt like hours. That's when Matt's phone, deep in his pocket, buzzed with a notification. The sound was tiny, but in that silence it might as well have been a gunshot. Immediately, a metallic bang exploded down the corridor, then another. Then the dragging started again, but this time it was faster, coming toward us. "Run," Aaron hissed. We bolted, flashlights flicking on as we sprinted through the tunnels. Our beams shook across rusted doors and peeling paint, never landing long enough to orient ourselves. Behind us, the sound was chasing. Clank, drag, closer and closer. We turned down one corridor, then another, until I realized we'd lost our sense of direction. My lungs burned, and the air smelled worse now, like old blood and rust. We burst into a wide chamber lined with control panels, wires hanging from the ceiling like vines. In the center was a massive table covered in dust, and papers so brittle they crumbled when Aaron brushed them. Then, from the far side of the room, we heard it again, closer than ever. The dragging. Something metallic scraping along the floor. That was enough. We bolted back the way we came, no longer caring if it was the right way. My flashlight beam bounced wildly, catching glimpses of things I wish I hadn't seen. Handprints smeared on the walls, deep scratches gouged into metal doors. Finally, ahead of us, I saw the bottom of the ladder. Relief shot through me. Matt scrambled up first, practically throwing himself onto the surface. Aaron went next. When it was my turn, I gripped the ladder so hard my knuckles popped. Halfway up, I risked a glance down. The light from my flashlight, dangling on its strap, swung across the corridor below. For the briefest second, I saw it. Something tall, hunched, with metal strapped across its shoulders and dragging chains dangling from its arms. Its head tilted back unnaturally, like it was staring straight up at me, even though its eyes were hidden in shadow. The second my light touched it, the dragging stopped. Silence. I didn't wait to see more. I scrambled the rest of the way up, my boots slipping, my breath ragged. Aaron and Matt yanked me out by my jacket, and the three of us slammed the hatch shut. We didn't stop to cover it or catch our breath. We just ran, through the trees back to the truck, barely speaking. We drove in silence until we hit a main road again. None of us even suggested going back. A few days later, Aaron texted saying he'd looked up more about that bunker. The government record said it was decommissioned in the early 70s, completely sealed. Supposedly, no entrances remained. But we know that's not true. And I can't get the image out of my head. Those chains. That hunched figure staring up at me. Sometimes, late at night, when my apartment's quiet and I can hear the pipes creaking in the walls, I swear I hear it again. Clank. Drag. Clank. And and I pray to God it never finds a way out. I need to give some background before I tell you what happened last fall. My family has always been a little complicated. On my dad's side, I know everything. His parents, his siblings, the whole family tree. But on my mom's side, almost nothing. She barely talks about her childhood, and whenever the topic comes up, she changes it so fast it's almost comical. She grew up in northern New Mexico, but that's all I really knew. No stories about her parents, no cousins, no traditions. Just silence. I used to push her about it when I was younger, but she always brushed me off. My dad once told me, "Don't take it personally. Your mom's family has some history better left in the past." I stopped asking after that. Still, there's always been one weird detail. Since I was a kid, my mom has mentioned her brother a couple of times. Never by name, just my brother. Like, my brother used to do that, or my brother would have laughed at this. But I never met him. He never showed up at birthdays, holidays, nothing. At one point, I honestly wondered if he even existed. That changed last year. Out of nowhere, my mom sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Your uncle has a cabin in the mountains. He invited you to spend a weekend there. Just you." I remember laughing awkwardly because it didn't make sense. Why now? Why me? She wouldn't even tell me his first name, just that he lived off the grid and preferred to keep to himself. I should have said no, but curiosity won. The following Friday, I drove 3 hours into the mountains, following written directions my mom had scribbled on a yellow notepad. No GPS, no address, just landmarks like turn left at the old water tower and follow the gravel road past the wooden cross. By the time I found the cabin, the sun was dipping low. It was a squat wooden structure tucked between dense pines, smoke trailing from the chimney. My stomach was tight. When I parked, the front door creaked open. A man stepped out. He looked maybe mid-50s, gray stubble, weathered face, wearing an old army jacket. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Daniel," he said. His voice was deep, calm, like he'd been expecting me. We shook hands, his grip strong and cold. He never told me his name, and I didn't ask. Inside, the cabin smelled like cedar and something else. Something sour, metallic, almost like pennies. The living room was dim, lit only by a fire. Animal skulls hung on the walls, polished smooth. The furniture looked handmade, rough and heavy. He offered me coffee. It was bitter, almost undrinkable, but I forced it down while he watched me from across the table. At first, the evening was normal. We talked about the mountains, the weather, fishing. But every time I tried steering the conversation toward my mom, his sister, his face hardened. "Not tonight," he muttered once, shutting me down cold. Later, he showed me to a small bedroom with a single bed and a heavy wooden door. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The cabin creaked and groaned like it was alive. Sometime past midnight, I heard something. Not the usual house noises. This was deliberate. Slow footsteps in the hall. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting. Then, softly, the sound of metal against wood, like a key turning in the lock. I sat up fast, heart pounding, but the door never opened. After a long silence, the footsteps retreated. I barely slept. The next morning, my uncle acted like nothing happened. He made oatmeal and black coffee, whistling to himself. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But as the day went on, little things gnawed at me, like the way he stared at me too long, like he was studying me, or how he slipped and called me by my dad's name once, even though they'd never met. That night it got worse. I woke up to voices, low murmuring right outside my window. I couldn't make out the words, but it was more than one person. When I finally built the courage to peek through the curtain, my stomach dropped. In the clearing behind the cabin, my uncle was standing with 3 other figures. They were holding lanterns, their faces shadowed by hoods. My uncle raised his hands, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. The others responded in unison, voices rising and falling like a chant. I ducked back, shaking. My phone had no service, no signal at all. I thought about running, but the truck keys were in the living room, hanging on a hook by the door. Then, suddenly, the chanting stopped. Silence. I peeked out again. The clearing was empty. Except for one thing. Right in the dirt, facing the cabin, was a small wooden cross. It hadn't been there earlier. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the corner of the room clutching a flashlight until dawn. When morning came, my uncle acted perfectly normal again. He handed me coffee, asked if I'd slept well. I lied and said yes. Before I could say anything else, he put a hand on my shoulder and leaned in close. His breath smelled like smoke and metal. "You look just like your grandfather," he whispered. "He'd be proud you came." I left that afternoon, making up an excuse about school. He didn't stop me. In fact, he almost looked amused, like he knew something I didn't. When I got home, I confronted my mom. I told her everything, the chanting, the cross, the voices. She went pale, then furious. Not at me, at him. "You were never supposed to go there," she snapped. "Not alone." I begged her to explain, but she just shook her head, tears in her eyes. That side of the family, they made choices a long time ago. Choices I walked away from. "Don't ever go back." That's all she would say. I haven't heard from my uncle since. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind rattles the windows, I swear I hear that low chanting again. And I keep thinking about what he whispered to me, that I look just like my grandfather. So who exactly did I meet in that cabin? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed stories, subscribe and like this video. We share new stories every week.